When it was announced that Resident Evil 4 was getting a remake, I didn't imagine the make or break aspect of the game would be whether or not Ashley starts the game wearing a blazer. Or, for that matter, that the lack of inclusion of a line comparing boobs to ballistics would be viewed as a slight against the purported defining characteristic of one of the greatest games of all time. Before I get too far into this, let me just say up front that I do not condone censorship within the arts or products that act as a form of art within media as a whole. Even if a product contains stuff I disagree with or dislike, I don't want it to be censored because that goes against what creativity and the art form means in the first place. In the case of the Resident Evil 4 remake, I do not believe the changes made to the dialogue or the character design of Ashley have anything to do with censorship. Allow me to elaborate. Resident Evil 4 is considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time. It pioneered what it means to be a third-person action game. The DNA of over-the-shoulder third-person gameplay traces its roots to RE4. Without that game, the industry wouldn't be what it is today. While that game released with the intention of balancing the mixture of action and survival horror, it has probably become known more over the years for its defining action experience within the franchise more than anything else. That and those forsaken regenerators. I mean, for real, who's the masochist who designed those things? I'm kidding, I love them, even though they terrify me. I understand the original game is also known for its tonal mixture of RE's traditional horror elements and the stylistic bravado of Leon Kennedy. Ashley Graham is considered to be a part of that, as she is portrayed in a certain way to match that tonal mixture within the original. There's nothing wrong with that, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise. By the same token, we must also look at why changes were made to Ashley in the remake before we can determine if they were a form of censorship or not. Let us remember that it was with the release of Resident Evil 6 that fans were complaining right and left about the overemphasis on action instead of horror. We all said it wasn't scary anymore, the games were becoming almost parody-like, more than anything else. Well, Capcom heard this loud and clear. The focus of the franchise is more clearly centered on leveraging traditional survival horror aspects. That means the tone will be more rooted in horror and foreboding atmospheres, even if the game has a heavy amount of action in it. Why is what I just said relevant? While Leon himself is meant to be classically stylized with his macho portrayal remaining intact, as per the developer's statements thus far, the world around him was moderately refreshed with a sense of realism, which will ground the events within the context of the remake's more horror-focused world. It's not that the original was doing anything wrong, but this remake is refocusing the tone more so around the darker iteration of Resident Evil 3.5. Therefore, when we see Ashley Graham appear in this remake, she is designed to better fit within this particular game's atmosphere more specifically. The game's own directors have stated that Ashley will act more frightened and upset this time around to make her feel more realistically placed within the setting and situation. This isn't an example where the game developers are simply altering a female character for the sake of girl power, yeah, sister slay type stuff. If anything, feminists will probably be even more upset with this portrayal due to her acting frightened and being more vulnerable than the last time. As to Ashley's appearance in the game, folks are accusing the remake of trying to make her look unattractive. Well, I'll start by saying beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so if you don't find the face model they used for Ashley Graham attractive, remember, looks are subjective. What you find unattractive might be someone else's dream girl. That's the truth, I'm just saying. Beyond the criticism of her looks lies the obsession with Ashley wearing a blazer. It's pretty obvious that the blazer was included for two reasons. The first being that it's cold, therefore it makes sense for Ashley to be wearing that when she was abducted in the first place. Secondly, it was designed as a callback to her original appearance in Resident Evil 3.5. The only differences between her 2005 outfit and this one are the blazer and stockings or pantyhose things that she's wearing on her legs. She still has the same outfit underneath. Plus, we already know Ashley will at some point lose the blazer during the game. So in essence, her outfit is going back to normal eventually. As for the whole controversy surrounding the removal of certain lines like the trademark ballistics line, I fully believe there is a reason for this which doesn't have to do with censorship. Surprisingly, or Perhaps not surprisingly, it ties into something I've already mentioned. Once more, we have to understand that the remake developers are trying to focus the tone of this version more so on the horror atmosphere. That doesn't mean we won't have big set-piece moments from RE4 represented here. It simply means that Ashley is meant to be more rooted and grounded in this world's atmosphere. Think of the number of times we've heard the devs say they wanted Ashley to behave or react more realistically, given the situation she finds herself in within the game. While you might have a preference for the original portrayal of Ashley in RE4, I don't think that discounts the RE4 remake iteration of her character. This isn't going to be a complete and fundamental alteration of her character. This is intended to be a portrayal of Ashley that simply matches the tone of the remake more appropriately. Capcom has still emphasized that Ashley and the other cast members are merely tweaked, given how they wish to keep the essential elements of each character the same. I really do not believe the changes to lines of dialogue or minor tweaks to costumes were done from a place of embarrassment or disdain for the original product, i.e., from a perspective of censorship. If that were the case, Capcom would go full Crystal Dynamics and start pretending the original version of the IP doesn't even exist, or that it's obsolete entirely. Like Crystal did with the Tomb Raider franchise, Capcom would massively overhaul everything they do with gameplay, narrative, character portrayal, design, and the branding of the IP itself. That's not what is happening here. Ironically, the original Ballistics line, it could be argued, was itself a form of censorship when you think about it, as the actual line, as it was written in Japanese, translates to big breast and not ballistics. So for some reason, the original localization team decided to remove the mentioning of the word breast and instead replace it with an innuendo rather than explicitly stating what the line was. For me personally, it seems somewhat shallow to base so much of a game's evaluation on a metric like the omission or inclusion of a line referencing a girl's boobs. RE4 isn't iconic because the game refers to how well endowed she is with her curves. RE4 didn't alter the shape of the gaming industry forever because Ashley not so subtly asked Leon to work overtime with her when they got back home. RE4 didn't revolutionize third-person action games because Ashley wasn't wearing a blazer. The things I mentioned are small and quaint aspects of the original's tonally mixed charm. They are a fun part of the journey, but they are not what ultimately made RE4 a defining experience in gaming for nearly 2 decades. I can entirely understand why people are trepidatious about tweaks or alterations like this occurring. Honestly, gamers have been essentially conditioned for the last 6 to 7 years that anytime re-releases can get away with butchering something integral to the original, they will do so. We've seen so many modern sequels seemingly abandon the very fabric and core of what made certain franchises fun, iconic, and beloved to begin with. My second love after Halo is, and always will be, Tomb Raider. I love the original games and even the first 3 Crystal Dynamics games to some extent. However, something happened after Underworld. Crystal has done everything they can to lose focus of what actually makes Tomb Raider games definingly a Tomb Raider experience. Those things would be actually raiding tombs, with more than a simple one-room puzzle as a side mission, and globetrotting with the coolest, dopest, most stylishly bad-awesome heroine of all time, Lara Croft. By the way, at some point I'm gonna have to do a separate video on the state of Tomb Raider and Lara Croft, a character which has been so awkwardly altered that an entire generation of gamers doesn't even know who she really was at this point. Anyway, back to the point of the video. When people see something like the ballistics line being omitted or witness a blazer being put on Ashley, they suddenly think about modern gaming trends and how many studios try to pander with wokeness and identity politics. The fact of the matter is not every single instance of change in a modern game or remake is a reflection of this. Sometimes it is, but not every single instance of change. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't believe the changes were done for the reason of censorship, for censorship's sake. While Louise acts as more of the wild, unpredictable personality throughout the game, Ashley will act as the grounding stake, planted firmly to keep a sense of believability surrounding her reaction to the situation she finds herself in. Finally, I don't think either version of RE4 negates the relevance or existence of the other. The remake and the original will deserve to be played and appreciated for their own merits. I think perhaps the most telling aspect of the remake game is that I haven't seen anyone getting mad about the removal of QuickTime events. Why? After all, this is an example of cut content. Well, for starters, I've never known anyone who thought that QuickTime events were good game design. As someone who was shocked by how the RE3 remake basically neutered Jill's character and butchered the original game into a snack-sized version of itself, I'm not eager for the RE4 remake to make a bunch of changes to the core of Resident Evil 4. Personally, I didn't even want the line removed or any of the lines removed to begin with. However, Ashley Graham will not be character assassinated by wearing a blazer or by having characters refuse to comment on her boobs. She can be just as enjoyable of a supporting character regardless of those two factors. I understand the sentiment, but I do not feel that these tweaks are anything more than surface level aspects. To me, what made Resident Evil 4 a timeless classic is so much deeper and far more important than a blazer. Still, that's my opinion. Why don't you let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, clicking that like button, hitting that little bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any new videos as soon as they drop. Thanks again, and have yourself a great day.